Hello everyone, and welcome to an update of the Washington Terminal Company Model Railroad. My name is David Muse, and apologies for the length of time that has gone by. So let's get started. You remember this was the old layout. This was the ladder leading into the yard. Another look at that same picture, just a different angle. And this is from the end of it, looking back down towards the curve. And then from the curve back down the other way towards where the yard would be and the yard. Well, after a year of renovation and the layout not being around, I started looking at videos and photographs, and I was having problems before I put the layout away. But when I got it back a year later, I started messing with the layout and found I was having real problems with an area on the layout. So I thought I'd try and resurrect it, save it. I just couldn't. It was too much of a headache. It was a couple of areas actually. So what I did was I started taking all of this up, salvaging switches out of it, and just starting to prepare for something I didn't think I was going to have to do, but I wound up doing. And once you see what it is now, you'll see why, and I'm glad I did. This was the area that was giving me the biggest problem. This was the top of the ladder leading into the yard and off of one of the freight mains. And another look at it, that little piece of track there in the center was the pain. I just could never get that right. Now, cars would go through, locomotives would go through, but every now and then I would have derailments and it started to become problematic. So I thought, let's make a change. And this is what happened. I took those modules apart, saved those switches, and wound up rebuilding all of the modules I had. I had four modules, I'm sorry, 5 modules. And actually now I have 6. I've added a new one to it. But all of these are rebuilt. They're the original sizes, 8 foot long, but instead of 20 inches wide, they're now 24 inches, and these here are 33 inches wide still. After the rehab of them, I went out and bought green foam. Doesn't make much of a difference, but I do find this a little bit better. And they had 1 inch, which before I was using 3/4 inch, and I find this to be a little firmer. Actually, this particular foam is a little bit lighter, and I like it a little bit better. I also use clear DAP to adhere the foam into the insert into the wood frame, and also to put cork down, and also for the track. Works well for all of them. And this is a couple of the modules now rebuilt with their foam inserts, and this really turned out a lot better than I expected. I am not a carpenter by any stretch. And this kick out here, I'll explain what I did on the kick out and the one at the top there with the module at the top, that it's going to have a curve in it. So with that done and those modules rehabbed now, I can move forward. And I started dry fitting track. And the first place I needed to start was the curve, because that's very important as to what size cars I can handle. I like passenger cars and also 85-foot flat cars, so I had to make sure that the curves could handle it. And I started working on the outside main line. That kick out is an extra foot, so that's 33 inches with an extra 12-inch kick out, and that helps that curve get around. So that actually gives me about a 43, 44-inch radius as I've projected it. It's very smooth. As you can see, I'm dry fitting everything in first, including the cork, and then the switches leading into the yard. This is the other module, which is just as important, because the main line is at the top with the cork there. 2 switches on it. The switches closest to you are for Ivy City. Different orientation you see here. The 3 switches to the left bottom are for Ivy City and Freight Main. The 2 at the very top in the center are on the main line, and the 2 to the right. One brings you in off the main line, and the other one takes you to freight and passenger. This is a dry fit of that same area. As you can see, the 2 main lines are really taking shape. Everything's taking shape here, including the Y. And the Y is important for me also because that takes everything over to Ivy City for passenger and diesel service. So with the dry fit done, now I can move on with actually laying cork down and making switch pads by just maneuvering the cork into position as I need it. And it takes a few extra, moments to do this, but the end result looks really good when you put your ballast down there and you have that profile sanded down just right. It really puts that nice V shape in there. This is everything on that module pretty much just about done. Another shot looking down on how I cut things out, and that's why saving those little pieces of cork from other portions that you use is so important, because you may need to fill in. So I plan on fill in here, and as you can see, I just make a pattern and just go for it, and it works out really well. These are two modules together now, the curve as I call it, and the module with the leads in and out from the passenger and freight, and also the main lines on it. And another look from the other side there. And as you can tell, that curve with the passenger cars on it is really, really going to work for me. Plus I'm running long steam. So now I'm laying cork down for the passenger line and also the freight mains and the yard ladder. Those are the main lines that are have rail on them at the top. Now on the bottom, the main lines, and once again, as you see, the pads for the switches made out of the cork that's laid down there. Just comes out a lot better, and for me a lot easier to do. And that's the end result with those two modules. Now in this photograph, there's no power to these two modules yet. This is just track and cork and make sure and everything is laid out just the way it should be. And I don't have the ends all soldered down just yet in this photograph, but I was getting there. And then I added a third module to it on the end of that, and that's the main lines headed out from that curve and headed on out to the north as the layout is orientated, or will be orientated once it's all set up. But it was a lot of fun to do this. I still have a lot more to do. And I found on this portion that you just saw, I'm going to need switch machines. There are 7 switches there that I'm going to have to put switch machines on. I thought everything was going to be hand throw, so I'm using the Walther's horizontal position switch machine. And from the top of the switch machine itself to the bottom of the servo there is 1 5/8 inches. So that's very shallow. I had to make wooden pads because I have a foam surface, so I had to cut foam out to accommodate the 1/4 inch thick wood blocks. And the blocks are just hobby wood, nice firm solid hobby wood, and I put polyurethane on them also. Since this is going to be outside, moisture is an issue, and whether it was going to be inside or outside, I would do it anyway just because of moisture. And I don't want that curling up with the switch machine on it. Now once those are all epoxied in, the epoxy's dried, then I can go in. I drop my feeders in, and then I start drilling the holes for the throw rods. And that's with the actual switch machine in. And to give you some idea, that piece of wood there is the side of the module, and that's a 4-inch piece of wood on that particular module. The top of that same module with other feeders drop down, or getting ready to be dropped down, and that's 18 gauge wire that I'm using there. So everything, this is automotive wire, by the way, which is a lot looser than just household electrical wire, and I like it a lot better using both the 14 gauge and 18 gauge wire, automotive wire from AutoZone, as a matter of fact. And that's everything all hooked in. Just got to hook it all into the barrier strip up there, or terminal strip, and I'll have power to the rails, and just have to put the cables on to the switch machines and hook them up to the buttons so I can activate them. So what's next? Well, this is what's next. I've now had an opportunity to take 2 of the modules. I thought I would have the 3rd module completed as far as wiring, and I wanted to put 3 modules out and test all three together, make sure that rails were the right height, proper alignment of the modules and all that good stuff, and that I was getting consistent power from one module to the next. Not through the rails, I mean not putting clips on the rails, but actually using the connectors that I've made and put on the bottom, so that way it's a full end-to-end test of all the components. And that's very important for me because I don't want to have to keep going back and redoing things. This will be the last time I will redo. And that's another shot just looking right down the lines. Looks kind of good, I must admit myself. Well, everything, yeah, great. Looks great out in the sun. Hey, does it work? That's the big question. So I pulled a Suzy Q out of the box. This is an Athearn Genesis SD70, and put it on the rails. No LEDs in it, no sound. I do have another unit that has sound I need to take out and put on there because that's a better test. The rails, I did not clean the rails. I wasn't thinking, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because it showed just how I have everything wired up, which is very good. I put feeders on all the rails, including switches. Every rail has a feeder on it to make sure there's continuity of power all the way through. So just for a little more fun, I just changed the camera angle and turned Suzy around and brought her back, and just wanted to make sure that, like I said, everything was working good between these two modules. The third module I mentioned that you saw in some of the earlier photographs, I'm almost finished wiring the main line completely, and then I'll start working on the passenger terminal. And I'm not ready to go to the freight yet, but I'm a little ways away from that because I want to get that, make sure that's all in like I want it and ready to go before I start putting any feeders in and securing things down. And for switches, that will all be in that area, hand throwing, no switch machines. So I hope you've enjoyed this update. Thank you very much for your time. Please hit the like button if you liked it, and if you like, leave a comment. Take care.